Now, in this course so far, we've talked a little bit about when TypeScript just assumes a variable can be any type at all. For example, if I define the variable a and I don't give it a default value and I don't give it any type information, it just assumes that a can be anything. So I could set it to a number here, I could set it to a string. It's going to work just fine because TypeScript says, I don't know what this is. It could be literally anything. And TypeScript actually has a specific type for that, and that is called the any type. As you can see inside of here, if I hover over this, this is inferred as the type any. And I could manually type this as any as well by writing out any like this, and that's going to mark this as an any variable. So even if I give it a value of 4, for example, it still says that this can be anything, so it doesn't matter what I assign it to, whether it's an object, an array, a number, a string, it doesn't matter. TypeScript just says this could be anything. Now, the great thing about this is it means you can just write your code like normal JavaScript, because JavaScript, every variable is any type by default. But obviously the downside is you lose pretty much all of the benefits of TypeScript when you use any. For example, I no longer have any autocomplete because it doesn't know what this is. It doesn't know, is it a string? Is it a number? Is it a Boolean? Is it an array? Is it an object? Is it a date? It has no idea, so you can't get any autocomplete, and you really don't get any error protection as well because, again, TypeScript doesn't know what this is, so it can't prevent errors because it doesn't know what it's trying to prevent. So really, any is a bad idea. And most often when you're writing out code, if you're writing any like this, that's generally a code smell and something that you should not do in your code. You almost always want to remove any's anywhere that they show up inside of your code. Now, for the most part, you probably won't run into problems with any showing up in your code unless you obviously manually add them yourselves, or you're creating a variable without actually giving it a value, or you give it a default value of like null or undefined, which in that case, it's always going to be a default value type of any here. But the other scenarios where you may run into any that you need to be aware of is if you use json.parse, you pass it some string, the actual return of JSON parse is going to be any. For example, if I say const a is equal to that and I hover over this, you can see it has a type of any. And that's just because TypeScript doesn't know what the object or value being returned from JSON parse is. It could literally be anything at all, so it just needs to be able to account for all of those different things. Same thing if you make a fetch request. So if I make a fetch request to some URL, and then I want to get my data back, so I say res.json. Now I have my data here that I can use. So we'll get data. Whoops, make sure I clean up my code a little bit. There we go. And if I go over this data, you can see that this is again a type of any because it doesn't know what the data being returned from your API is. It could be JSON, it could be something entirely different. It has no idea. It could be unknown, undefined, doesn't know. So it just defaults the type to any. So that's something that's really important to make sure you understand because you may be using fetch inside your code base. You may have this data variable that you start accessing different properties on. And before you know it, you realize that you're not getting the error protection that you need because this is inferred as a type of any, which pretty much when you use any, it just shuts down TypeScript for anything that uses that variable or piece of code that you've typed as any because it just doesn't know what to do. Overall, my advice is to never use any unless you're in the process of maybe converting a JavaScript project over to a TypeScript project, which I'll cover much later in this course. But pretty much if you're writing TypeScript code from scratch, there's almost no use case that you would want to use any in because it just essentially shuts down using TypeScript and gets rid of all the benefits of using TypeScript.